people don't know this. There were people in my platoon that were done, 100% ruined, could not function or operate.
Today I sit down with Marcus Capone, a former SEAL Team 6 special operator with multiple combat deployments. I feel like we can all learn a lot from his experiences, how to heal, and how to move forward.
You know, when you try to better yourself, it's not a one and done. So much of my life has been just being part of the team and being accepted, and that's all I cared about. And what you realize is that you really wind up being part of that institution versus making decisions for yourself. As an officer, you have to be very careful about being part of the pack. We expect the officer to be that leader, right? To be that forward-facing external force.
So what was Bud's like?
The ones who last are just the ones that can keep going and endure physical and mental pain. You have to be comfortable being completely uncomfortable and in pain all the time. And that's what I think prepares you for the rest of your life.
Marcus, thanks for coming on, man. It's a huge honor to meet you.
Thanks, Judd. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited.
So we met before this for about an hour to have coffee to get to know each other. And the thing that struck me compared to you based on some of the other operators that I've met is the aura when you walk in. You seem very grounded and self-aware, and you have a very happy aura about you. And I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. What were you expecting?
Yeah, typical operators are, very nice, courteous people.
Angry.
A little bit. They have a sense of anger in them. And knowing your background, the treatments you went through, and your extensive combat history, and knowing a little bit about the struggles, I was completely taken off guard by how at peace you seemed, and just a happy nature about you, man.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that. One of the best, really thank you for that, because, this is when you try to better yourself, when you start taking a real hard look at yourself of how you can improve, it's not a one and done. And what I try to tell people, and I know we're going to get into this about, some of the treatments that, my wife and I have been focused on the last 6 years. We tell everybody this is not a magic bullet. It's not a panacea. It's kind of the start. It gets you back to your baseline, but it's still up to you to continue on, improving. People don't understand that initially. Everybody, Americans want just to take a pill and get better, or they want to, inject themselves with something and get better and happen overnight. But it's really easy. I say, if you want to get in shape, do you go to the gym for a day? Or do you go for a month and you get yourself in shape, and then do you stop for the rest of your life? The answer is no. Mental health, wellness, it's the same thing, right? You have to be consistent. And then especially if you have some things going on in your brain, in your body, you really have to be consistent, because when you stop, that's when you start to spiral again. That's when you can kind of crawl back into that dark place, as I call it. So I appreciate the comment about the aura. The best, one of the best, geez, I'm losing my thought here. I guess comments I received from an individual I was talking to at a restaurant a few years ago, speaking to him for 45 minutes, and he goes, "Oh man, you were in the military?" He goes, "I didn't even know that."
Exactly.
And I went, "Wow."
Yeah.
I just said, that's wonderful. I said, that's the best thing I've ever heard, because it means I didn't use acronyms, and I didn't come across to this guy I had for the last.
That's funny, because somebody, every time somebody's like, "Oh, I knew you were in the military," you have that sense about you. I'm like, oh man, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's not really a compliment, but I appreciate you trying to be nice.
Right. And it's not, it's not a bad thing, but it's, when you transition, you want to transition.
Yes.
You want to try to, you're trying to reinvent yourself. And, the more
I think that's a misconception people have, is when veterans get out and they think they're somehow above and superior to civilians. And a lot of it, the vets that I talk to, it's the constant struggle to reconnect and get back to where they were before in the military. And I feel like it's a misconception that some civilians have about veterans. You know what I mean? They're desperate to reconnect and feel connected again.
Yeah. You were somebody else prior to joining the military, right?
Yes.
You were this different individual. You had a life. You had, for many, I mean, many of my friends that I initially that I went to buds with were out of college. Some of them were closer to 30 years old. So they've had lives prior to joining the military. And then, of course, they spent 10, 15, 20, or 30, now 30 years. You become changed, right? You're a changed person. You have to conform. You're part of the tribe, and then you transition out, and many become lost, and then you find yourself, or you try to get back to maybe the old version of you, or you don't even know what the old version, or you may not even have that version. You may just be this different being. Yeah. And for many, it's tough. For others, it's not. For me, I think I failed, right, initially, and I had to kind of climb back and find out who I was again.
Some of the interviews I've listened to that you have done, and the research leading up to this, it's very long, great conversations. And then the one thing stuck out with me, a story you told when you were a BUDS instructor. Kind of one of your low points was when you pulled the kid out of the water and put your knee on his chest, and for some reason that's what stuck with me. And then when you walked in, the difference between the person that walked through that door and then the person that did that could not have been more far apart. So
yeah, wow. That's what you remember. His name was Harris, and this students were running in and out of the water. One of my best friends I served with was Josh Harris, and we lost him in 2007. And something just, I was watching him, and he was slacking. He was not the guy I wanted to work with in the future. And something about me just completely flipped. And I walked up to him as he was really just not keeping up with the rest of his class. You could tell he was just like, he was dragging, or he was not pushing it. And I picked him up. I slammed him onto the sand in front of all the instructors, in front of all the students. We were right in front of the flagpole. So right in front of the headquarters right there, they could see everything out the window. And like you said, I had my knee on him, kind of like you would in a fight, in a way. I had control, and this kid was terrified. And I just had my finger in his face, and I was screaming at him. And I was like crying. Remember that? And it was crazy. And one of the instructors after, who I was close with, he was 15 years older than me, been around for a long time. And he just said, "Hey man, like, what the fuck?" He said, first off, he said, you can't do that in front of the flagpole. You're going to be gone. Second, like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right.
Good for him for asking, like seeing that there was something deeper going on there.
Yeah. I mean, and granted, instructors were crazy, right? We're all crazy.
Yeah.
But this was, this was definitely another level. And I had it done to me too when I was when I was a student. But when you come to find out, those instructors, like, there was some real shit going on with them. And you find out later, this one got kicked out, or that one got arrested, or so. Just
when we're going through that training process, the instructors, they almost seem like gods to us. You know what I mean?
100%.
And the ones that made the most profound impact were the ones that could stay the calmest, and a lot of intimidation and awe that they would just not lose their temper, but be a very calculated, even if they're saying mean shit to you, they would do it in a very controlled way. And it's made a big impression on me of the need to, if you're a mentor or a leader, to stay composed and stay in control. And
it's the only ones I looked up to.
Yeah.
The instructors that, as you just said, their demeanor was, you knew they were professionals. They did not have to scream. They did not have to yell. They did not have to act like drill instructors. Right? Yeah. As a group, because even though you're young and quote unquote, you're stupid, you don't know anything, right? As a student, you know enough.
Yeah.
And you respect there was one instructor, there was only one instructor there, if you can believe that. And this was in 2001, that I had actually seen some combat experience. Fast forward, it's like the opposite now. Mm. Oh, I wouldn't say now, but when I was an instructor, 2010, 11, where every instructor had real combat experience, and a lot of it. There was one, and he was the one that we all respected, we looked up to. He never yelled. If he raised his voice, it was, you listened.
Yeah.
And, many of the others were really just chest beating and,
Yep.
really ego driven. So
that's a big misconception that people have about the training for like the higher level schools for special operations is there's not a lot of screaming and yelling. They give you a standard and you're expected to meet it. And there's some corrections. And if you don't meet it, then you're just gone. Like there's never a lot. The good ones don't scream and yell. And they're there to teach you, but there's a standard you have to meet. But they're, even in Ranger School, it stood out to me. They were not there to wash us out. They were there to teach us. And if you learned, they would help you, even in Ranger School.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I was like really struck by that. Like they're not trying to make me fail here. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think I would say that's individual. I would say there were definitely some guys I worked with that could care less if a single guy got through training.
Yeah.
And others, I think, as you mentioned, were probably more professional and wanted guys to succeed. I kept my cool. I had for the most of the time. I mean, that incident was a special incident. I think, the kid being the name Harris.
Yeah, I think that probably came from a good place though. Yeah. Like you were just desperate to see these kids prepare themselves and not let each other down. And just, I don't think you were trying to get a kid to drop out necessarily.
No, I mean, I think if you ask any of my students, I was relatively calm.
Yeah.
So,
there's so much. You have an incredible life story. I don't think the time we have on this platform is enough to cover it and do it justice, but there's a lot of different ways we could cover that life story. But, I think the simplest way is just start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Where you grew up, what your childhood was like, what you were all about as a kid, and, just kind of start from there.
Yeah. So I grew up in New York. I grew up in Long Island. I had not a whole lot of complaints from growing up. I really was a jock. I mean, I played, that's all I did, and that's all I cared about. So I at 3 years old, I think my parents threw me in the pool. I was on skis at 3. I played t-ball. I did everything. We lived in a beach town. So we lived in Long Beach, New York. So in the summertime, I was on the beach all day, every day. I wasn't going to baseball practice or soccer or wrestling.
Were you a pretty proficient swimmer as a youth, or was that something you had to teach yourself?
No, I was a really good swimmer. And I was on the swim team, I think at 4 and all the way through high school. So for me, going into the Navy and, that was it just seemed like a natural thing to do. Not just the swimming piece, but also just being in the ocean. I was a lifeguard growing up. It was the best job ever. You got paid, because you had to be certified. So you get more money than if someone was working at McDonald's or something else. So I loved the ocean. I loved big waves. I loved,
There's a lot of people that are good in a swimming pool, but the open water of the ocean is a whole different
It's
animal.
different, it's a different beast. In swimming, if you're out in the water swimming, it's one thing, but going through the surf, it's definitely a different animal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I was the only child. I always like to say, Catholic dad, Jewish mom, and they raised me with nothing. So like no religion. So I grew up really no religion, no spirituality, just kind of.
What was your mom and dad like?
Just doing it. They were kind of typical New Yorkers both from Queens, both from Bayside. My dad went to Holy Cross High School, where I also went, all boys Catholic high school, tough. And my mom went to Bayside High School. My dad actually was sent away at 4 years old to all boys boarding school in the Bronx. As you can imagine, probably what went on then.
So that would have been in the 60s or
yeah,
man.
In like the early 50s.
Early 50s,
he was born in 46, 47, so like 50 or 51.
Yeah, in the Bronx, boarding school.
All boys, surrounded by a bunch of Catholic priests and brothers. And looking back, I could, kind of figure out why he was the way he was.
How was that? What was he like?
I mean, he was, sometimes he can be the best, and put all his energy into me. My parents put a lot of their energy into me, but he was also demanding in a way where he could be extremely violent and physically violent. And also I felt like I wasn't accepted unless I performed. So I had to hit a home run or throw a touchdown or win, in a wrestling match.
Was he tall like you?
No, he was 6 foot, Irish Italian, really tough. Grew up with a really tough father in Queens and a really tough grandfather.
Did you know your
Italians.
grandpa at all?
I didn't know them at all.
Yeah.
They died at a young age.
What did your dad do for work? I'm sorry.
No, he kind of bounced around. He went to college. He got drafted during Vietnam. He never went overseas. He was a dog handler, so he was an MP. So I grew up hearing a lot about his dogs and who they used to bite. So I'm like, I don't know if he was a very good dog handler, but because I'm like, hey, Dad, you're not supposed to. And it's funny because we always grew up with, well, my wife Amber will say, crazy dogs, crazy animals. It's the first time she met our pit bull. He almost took her arm off and like ripped her sweater. And my dad would tell everybody like, oh no, I was a dog handler, in the military. And they would like look at him and laugh because none of our dogs ever
were handled.
Never.
They're mishandled.
Ever. They were absolutely mishandled. I'm like, hey, Dad, I don't think you should tell anyone anymore that you were a dog handler.
That's so funny.
So,
did you have a lot? So you had a lot of animals growing up?
Yeah, I always had cats, dogs. I loved them. Love dogs. I love dogs now. And so, childhood was just as it was. In Long Island, I just thought this is the way it is. If you stepped out of line, you got the backhand or the belt. But maybe it definitely probably gave me some reasons why I went into the military out of college, or I think things that happen as a child obviously shapes us. It obviously shapes us as an adult. And, it forces us to do certain things that we do. Some use, maybe compartmentalize some of the things that happen as a kid. And, you go into investment banking, or you go into the military, or you go into, things that you just put your full focus and energy on, and where you're trying to prove to yourself and prove to others. And I feel like I had that because I was always having to prove myself to my parents. I felt like just to get love, just to get acceptance.
Was your mom kind of like that too, or was your mom more?
I think she was just kind of along, for the ride.
Yeah.
Type. She 100% loved me. I was her it, and I think I know because we talk about it now. The things that she witnessed really hurt her. And the things that I witnessed that he did to both me and her hurt me. Looking back, and I think we can both recognize that now.
Yeah. Is your dad still alive?
No, he passed. He passed in 2017 of pancreatic cancer.
Did you guys have a close relationship when you were older at all, or how would you characterize that?
I mean, I couldn't wait to get away as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know why. Like I see our kids right now. Our kids are amazing, and they want to be around us all the time. They want to live near us. I couldn't wait to get out of the house and go as far away as I could.
Yeah.
And
is your mom still alive?
She is. We moved her down to Boca, Boca Raton, Florida.
Typical New York to Florida.
New York to Boca. I don't know if I'd ever live there. I feel like every time I go visit her, I'm stepping back in New York, and this is the reason why I stepped away.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, what was your favorite sport in high school? What was the sport you excelled at the most, do you think?
I mean, ironically, I was actually a pretty good swimmer, even though I didn't put any effort into it.
Yeah. You're kind of built like a swimmer. When I saw you, I was like,
I was, but I really swam to like stay in shape and be limber for baseball, for football. I really love football. I don't know what the draw was there. I think it was just, I grew up, I was a quarterback from day one. And I don't know if I was a good quarterback, but, for me, football was kind of felt like it was life. I just loved the whole aspect of being on a team and being with individuals who were just felt like you were in a group, right? Like you were in a gang, you were in a club.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to do in college. I could have played baseball, football, and football was the draw.
Like quarterback is a leadership position. Do you feel like you had leadership characteristics even in high school, or?
No, I did not. I did not think I was a good leader. I think I was a better team player.
Yeah.
I think I was a better follower.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be accepted, fit in. And as a quarterback, as a leader, that's not what you need to do.
Yeah.
Right? You need to be nonconformist, unconventional, You need to make decisions for yourself. I don't want to say for yourself, but you need to be more of an individual.
Yeah.
Right.
And being a leader is lonely too.
Being a leader is lonely.
Yeah.
It's very real when they say, I would say, being at the top is lonely, right? Because I remember my freshman football coach, Tom Frawley, who I still keep in touch with. He checks in all the time. My dad coached with him. And he just said, security of the pack or not. He said, and he, in the beginning when we had our like 2 and 3 days, they would pick the captains. They would send you around the football field, quarter mile. The first 2 that came in were the captains that were up front. And he always used to talk about the security of the pack. You can be with the pack or you can be out front and be one of the leaders. Yeah. And I will never forget that because
it's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. So much of my life has been just being part of the team, being accepted. And that's all I cared about.
Yeah.
And what you realize is that you really wind up being part of that institution versus making decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
And in the last few years, I've broken away from that security of the pack and have been able to focus on what I need to get.
Man, that is really rare to have that level of introspection and then being able to see yourself for what it is and make adjustments that you need to later in life for the next stage of life. Like it's kind of a rarity, man.
It's really tough. Yeah. I think we were joking earlier. You said you were doing some due diligence from some of my guys from my old unit, and one of them said, "Yeah, Marcus was a really solid guy here, solid operator, except he's doing too much social media now," which I think is hilarious because it's funny. I'm not. I plan to do more because it's really time to.
Yeah.
For an individual not to break out and do what they need to do, you can't look back, and you do have to break away from that security of the pack. And those, your friends, your teammates, really your brothers, your close knit group will always be your close group. They might call you a knucklehead for doing something stupid, of course. We would expect that, but they're not going to give you the shirt off their back if you need it. Right. And I still have my very close group of friends, and I haven't done anything that is embarrassing me or my family or them anyway. So
we talked about it, and it's getting better, but it used to be frowned upon if you did what you did and you weren't just a SEAL. Like we're going to talk about this, like you were in Dev Group or I don't know the preferred nomenclature.
It's fine.
So which is a whole nother story I want to get into. And it used to be more frowned upon to do anything in the public eye. And that's a really good point, because I think a part of that is you feel like if you step out of that group, you lose the security of the group. And I think a lot of the draw to stay in it, even though these guys had stories to tell, and I kind of wish it was more accepted so these guys would tell their stories. And they don't do it because I think they're afraid to lose the group.
Jed, the only reason I became a SEAL is because, you'll laugh at this, but there's a few. One is I watched G.I. Jane on
that's awesome.
on TV, which, by the way, if you look at it as a movie, it's a great movie. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Okay. But as a person who really grew up with a military background, you look at that and go, "Oh, is that what it's like?" They talk about this group. And by the way, it was like, I forgot the name of it. It was some weird name for a group. It was like a conglomerate of special operations, if you remember.
Yeah.
I thought that was real. And they talk about this group being like, these are like these are the guys you plug in when the whole world goes to shit, right? And I immediately was like, oh, I want to do that. Then I actually started reading books and seeing, Discovery Channel shows on the SEAL teams. And gosh, I just lost my train of thought. We go back a little bit. The question you were talking about.
Just the hesitation to step out of your group.
Just to step out. So the reason, though, why I went this route and not, let's say, in the Army or in the Marine Corps was because somebody wrote a book.
Yeah.
And most of the books that I read, I literally read every book from Vietnam, every one I can find on naval special warfare and how it started and everything. And I got more excited. If someone introduced me to an Army Ranger and say, "Hey, you need to read this book about this Ranger or about this SF guy," or like, that's where I would have been.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me,
that's all of our stories.
That's all of our stories. Exactly. Right. So it wasn't like I got brought up into this world of, my dad was a Navy SEAL, like, because there's plenty of individuals I work with who had lineage, uncles and that. It was just there at the right time. So to your point, we need to tell these stories.
Yeah.
We don't need to give up secrets, and that's a whole different thing. But we need to tell stories because it gives, the generation behind us an idea of what they can do and what they look forward to doing. And maybe, they might want to be a Marine, right? So they go read a book about being a Marine, or they might want to be a pilot.
Yeah.
Right. But if there's nothing out there,
exactly.
How do you know what to do?
And it humanizes our operators a little bit too. Like, it's kind of unfair how we put them on a pedestal and dehumanize them. And these people are human beings, and they have lives pre-military and post-military and their own struggles. You know what I mean? I think those stories need to be told too. And it's unfair, I think, to, Delta guys and SEAL Team 6 guys when they walk into a room and they expect this perfect warrior human being, and they don't see like the whole person.
Yeah. Well, we used to get a joke, right? It's called living the lie. Like,
yeah, I know.
No, but at the end of the day, still, I still believe this in my gut. I worked with some of the most incredibly best human beings,
and that makes it
are on this planet
even more impressive.
Yeah.
When you see the human side of these people, that they have their own struggles in their marriage, in their life, and with their health. They have their own weird quirks, and then you see them go out. They're not a Hollywood movie star. Some of them do look a little goofy, and and then they go out and they do these amazing things. It makes it even more impressive. It humanizes it. It's like, no, this is an amazing human being.
Yeah.
To me, Ranger Regiment, exposed to NCOs there, and I would see all the weird quirks these guys had that would never be a Hollywood actor. But then on the objective, this guy is like on it, and he has compassion and all these things that get weeded out in some of these Hollywood movies, but then he'd go back and, like, one of the most amazing guys I ever worked with, a master sergeant, he would read romance novels and listen to James Taylor. And he went out as just an animal on the objective, and then come back and he's a very human, gracious human being that, you know what I mean? So
we worked with some of the smartest guys too.
Very intelligent
and not
too.
Smart, and not smart in the sense that, a Harvard or MIT PhD.
Some of them were, though.
And some of them were, 100%. You're right.
Yeah.
And
you have an MBA as well. I mean, like.
I do. Yeah. I have 2 graduate degrees. I joke with everybody. I say I'm the dumbest person with 2 graduate degrees. But we had individuals that didn't have PhDs that were as smart or smarter than anyone else. They were just really focused on what they loved doing. So if it was like building motorcycles, like, they were the best at that.
Yeah.
Right.
It just carried over into other
100%.
things.
They just, may not have wanted to do that in a classroom. Yeah. And that's the other thing that I think a lot of the public don't realize.
These are very contemplative human beings.
Yeah.
I
do get, whether it's like, I don't know if it's passive aggressive, but some of the individuals I work with now, they're bankers and private equity guys and this and that, will say, hey, why don't you call some of your knucklehead buddies, or right? And they just, that definitely rubs. Yeah. Because I know how they view us.
Yeah.
And they view my teammates. And I know it's just like, hey, they just didn't want to sit in the classroom and read through a book that they thought was boring.
Yeah.
But they want to jump out of planes and do other cool stuff that you can never do. Right.
Yeah. We were attached when I was over there in Afghanistan. We were the daytime or the nighttime guys, and they were the VI guys, the unit. And I think it was C Squadron. And I was struck by the variance in the nature of them. Like, some guys, if you look at them, they looked the part. Some guys didn't at all. Like, if they're in civilian clothes, you would never guess that this guy is one of the most amazing warriors in the world. But then the thing that always strikes me, and it's funny about special operations guys, is how funny they are. They have very, like, dry, witty senses of humor. And you can't be stupid and have a great sense of humor. You know what I mean?
Right.
So every room I was ever in with those guys, there was always, like, the funniest conversations going on that were the most complex. I'm like, if people could just hear what these guys actually talk about, they'd view these guys in a whole different light.
I know. I'm gonna copyright it now or trademark it. Like, there still needs to be a book about. We used to joke about these books that should be written about what actually goes on. Yeah. And it was usually when we were on the range picking up brass for like 3 hours. Yeah. It was like, we could write a whole book on just stories and picking up brass. Yeah. That's what we're doing all day, every day.
It's for the most profound memories. A lot of them just are these random things, the conversations you have, and like the most random memories. It's not what people think.
Well, as you know, you spend a lot of time, with each other. I mean, you spend more time with your teammates than anything and anybody for many years.
Yeah, man. And in the most extreme circumstances too, where you have to trust each other and you see each other at your best and your worst. And it's funny. My brother and I were laughing. If you remember the show A-Team,
of course.
Now, first of all, completely ridiculous show.
Marcus.
But the personalities on that team are so good, and it's kind of like it is. Like there's like you got your dork and your nerd, you got your dude whose personal life is just a shit show. You got like your roid head. It's like it's like, man, that kind of is how it really is. Like
you got your cigar smoker, right?
Yeah, you got to like
you got your
alcoholic. You're like you got a few of those for sure.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Your platoon commander's got a big cigar in his mouth and looks like he's running the show.
Yeah, pretending to anyway.
Yeah.
So sorry, man. I do this all the time. I get distracted, but let's go back to the timeline. You played quarterback, so you must have been pretty good at football.
I mean, I was okay. I was decent. I was good enough to get a scholarship. So I think.
How did you end up going to Southern Illinois University?
Yeah. So my senior year in high school, I got injured that summer in football camp. I tore several ligaments in my wrist. I wasn't able to play my
your throwing wrist.
My throwing wrist, and so there was an option: either try to play and then not play baseball, or and by the way, I was hurt. I really couldn't throw, or get surgery and then be ready for baseball season. And I played at a really tough league, was it Brooklyn Queens Catholic High School League, Bronx Manhattan, Brooklyn Queens. It was for basketball, football, and baseball, really tough. Basketball, insane. At 6'4", I was guarding guys 6'7" and 6'9" that were going everywhere. Division I. Baseball, same thing. Guys were getting drafted all over the place. And in football, we were tough. Most of the individuals in the Northeast were playing at Northeast schools, Boston College, Pitt, things like that. Not many were going to Alabama and Texas, but basketball, I argue with everybody that I believe I played in the toughest league in the country, maybe in the world.
Yeah.
And
New York City basketball is famous. People know basketball, just the Bronx, Brooklyn, Long Island.
Yeah.
The culture of youth basketball in New York City is pretty insane.
No, it was great. When I went out to school at SIU to play football, when we played pickup basketball, I was, I could hang with everybody.
Yeah.
It was good. So we made the decision, my parents and I, that I would get surgery and basically sit out. And I did. It almost took me 6 months to recover. It was that bad. But I was able to play baseball.
How did you hurt your wrist?
Football game.
Did somebody land on it? Or?
Yeah, I got sacked, and it was after a throw. So when I threw, my wrist went down.
Gotcha.
His shoulder hit this.
Oh, shit.
And it bent.
Oh, man.
It actually dislocated his shoulder and tore the 2 ligaments in my wrist. It was wild. It was really wild. Usually when you wouldn't kind of knock a shoulder out from that, but I guess the bone and everything.
Oh, dude.
But it hurt that bad, and I didn't have a great baseball season. Crazy thing is, swimming season, I had a cast on, and the doctor said, "Hey, we have this new waterproof cast," and it wasn't the cast; it was underneath. You know how you had that kind of
got you
felty material, but they had this waterproof material. So they cut the cast off. They put this waterproof material on, and I wound up swimming my senior year with a small cast.
No way.
Yeah. And I made the city finals and everything.
That's like hey, built a fin into this or something. You know what I mean?
Great, yeah. So anyway, so to continue on, because I didn't play my senior year, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. My freshman football coach said, "Marcus, you were a really talented quarterback. You should continue playing football." He said, I'm close with the football coach at Nassau Community College, which is one of the kind of leading junior colleges in the country, top 10 every year. He said, "I think you're good enough to play there." And I said, "Yeah, I still want to play ball."
People don't understand how competitive junior colleges are and the level of football being
Nassau Community was insane.
Yeah, especially baseball and football. It's crazy.
It was some of the best athletes I literally played with. I joke, I got a scholarship to play at Southern Illinois. That was like the smallest school of the individuals on the team, like the 25 that went to Division I that year. They went everywhere, right? They played. That's how good those guys were. And so I went to junior college. I played there. I did pretty well, and I got recruited to a few different places. Rutgers. I think I would have liked to go to Rutgers just because it was there. It was Big East.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get away.
Yeah.
And Southern Illinois just seemed like
that's FCS football. It's good football
It's
down
good.
there. So they're in a good league. They play like Western Illinois and Illinois State.
Yep.
I mean, we played Illinois State one year. They crushed us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the conference.
Yeah.
And so that was it.
What was your college experience like?
I loved college. I always joke with Amber that college was the best time of our lives, right?
What'd you major in as your undergrad?
Commercial recreation.
That's awesome.
Resort management.
And you met your wife in college, you said, right?
I met her in college. Yeah. So she was a senior in high school, but her dad was the head football coach, Sean Watson. And he was young. He was 34 years old, coaching, Division I school.
And you talk about, let's pressure. Your girlfriend's dad is your head coach.
Yeah, he recruited me from New York.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't meet him though. Excuse me, I didn't meet her.
Don't let him down on the field. Don't let him down with your daughter. You know what I
mean? Yeah. We can talk about this one for hours. I didn't meet her until he left and went. He did well at Southern Illinois, and then his best coaching friend was Gary Barnett.
Okay, yeah.
Who had just did really well at Northwestern. And he went up there to coach at Northwestern. So I believe he took over. I don't know if he was O coordinator there, but he was the quarterback's coach. And so when he left is when I actually met Amber. I didn't meet her. I literally didn't meet her before that. Okay. But when he found out that we were dating, he was not a happy camper. I promise. Oh no, he was not. And told her, stay away from him.
I mean, that's like a movie, man. Like the quarterback ends up dating your daughter, and
it was. I had gotten into a massive fight. I think 2 years prior to that, when I was a sophomore, I was named as a sophomore. I beat out 4 senior quarterbacks, and so I would have had 3 years starting. Kind of like I was going to really hit my stride, and I get named quarterback in the paper, and it's like first night of celebration after 2 days or 3 days, and we get in a big fight as a football team, of course, and a really big fight, and we put 8 fraternity folks in the hospital. They were the Pikes, Pi Kappa Alpha.
Shout out to them, Southern Illinois.
Shout out to Southern Illinois Pikes.
Leave a comment if you were a Pike at Southern Illinois during that time.
The Pikes were all the high school athletes that couldn't play in college.
It's funny. Every college has that fraternity,
I guess, and
they're all like fat alcoholics.
Yeah, they didn't like me. And long story short, I was the one that got nabbed because I was initially at this party, and then 30 football players showed up.
Yeah.
After I left, after I got jumped by the fraternity, and kind of next thing you know, there's 30 football players on the front doorstep of the fraternity.
That's good. They had your back, man. Yeah.
They did. Yeah. They really did. Their quarterback from New York, they had his back. So when I got taken in by the police that night, they wanted every name of every person that was there, and I would never.
You don't rat, man. You're from New York, dude.
Bro, you don't rat.
You don't rat, dude.
Snitches.
Was Jason White?
Snitches get stitches, right?
Was Jason White part of that fray?
What was Jason doing? I'm trying to think if he was there at that time or he came right after. I'm not sure if he was there. He would have been right in the middle of it for sure. Maybe. Background,
my best friend, Nick, Jason is his older brother, and just small world that he knows you. It's crazy.
That was crazy. Yeah. He was one of the best lifters on the team. I mean, I remember his
brother's insanely strong too.
Bench squat, clean, he had big numbers.
Yeah, they were insanely strong. So Nick's uncle was our head coach, John Ware, and he was a world-class powerlifter. And then Nick and Jason are both.
So they just had the genes. They had
strong individuals. Yeah. And now Nick runs ultra races and crap. It's insane.
Jason was awesome. He was one of my bros. Like we said,
he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met.
We used to go out, hang out. Our girlfriends were friends. I think they're still connected via social media. I haven't talked to him in years, but I follow some of the stuff he's doing in powerlifting, and he's awesome. But yeah, so I wouldn't give up any of the names, and because of that, Amber's dad had to do something, and what he did is he wound up suspending me. So he suspended me indefinitely for the whole season.
Oh man!
And it basically ruined my whole career there.
Oh yeah.
And I practiced every day. and I would write up, I would watch film of the games coming up for the week. I'd write up all the films, all the coverages, put like a whole summary together, give it to him for the quarterbacks. And that's all I did for the season. And I, played on the scout team because I could do that. So I could practice. I couldn't play. And, the other quarterbacks, they literally rotated through all of them. And I wind up coming back like the second to last game of the season. I got to split some time, and that was it.
Man, there's so many lessons in that story alone. Both what happened and, how you deal with that adversity, and like still work hard and be a team player when, there's a lot of lessons
that was tough because I knew I should have been suspended for a full season.
Yeah.
And what I did compared to what everybody else did, it was, there had to be a scapegoat. I was that scapegoat. So it crushed me honestly, for years, I was still having dreams of like playing football.
Yeah, that's
right.
True.
Because I never got to fulfill that, which I wanted to do, which was like, get a scholarship, be this, starting, football player. And that dream just got completely crushed.
That is like devastating, dude.
Yeah. And then my senior year, they transferred in a quarterback, an amazing quarterback from Missouri who was splitting time with one of the Heisman Trophy, like number 4 runner-up.
Shit.
So here's a guy who comes in that is just a pure quarterback. And I joke, I played quarterback as like a linebacker. And he wound up getting the starting nod when we were there. And so I wound up kind of transitioning, playing quarterback, and then moving over more into like a wide receiver, tight end role. And so I was going to prepare to play tight end my senior year, start at tight end. And I wind up popping positive for testosterone or steroids, going into my senior year. So everything just kind of washed down the tube, and my parents were not happy. And
that was definitely what years were that? What was that?
That was 99.
Yeah. So, that was definitely part of the football culture back then, a little bit more.
Yeah. Everybody I was playing with was cycling on and off. You had to. You didn't have to, but it was more the norm than the exception. So
yeah, when I got to Truman, the class not too long before me, like 6 of them had tested positive. So they were just definitely on the team after that.
Yeah.
Like, so if 6 test positive, it means like the whole team's on it, basically.
But definitely want to give a shout out to the quarterback, Kent Scornia. So he was my roommate, right? So we would, he transferred to Missouri. He was awesome. And we joke about it now, but he said we would get to our hotel rooms on the road. He would go to the bathroom. He would come out, and I would be naked on the bed, jumping up and down. He's like, "You're an idiot." And he's an extremely successful wealth manager now, like one of the top in St. Louis. And he's a supporter of our nonprofit.
That's awesome.
Is really cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah. They told us like, you're going to meet your best friends in life, in college football. And I did. And then you're going to meet your best friends in the military. And I did. You know what I mean? Because like when you come out of high school, like nobody's going to beat my high school bros, and I still love those guys, but there's a different level of college football and the bonds that you make, and then military, the bonds you make. Because the level of adversity you guys face together builds very strong, lifelong trust and bonds with each other.
Absolutely. I speak to one of my one friend, 2 friends that I grew up with. I consider best friends. One is in the Secret Service at a senior position, really senior position. We speak pretty frequently, and the other just a successful dude, right? How did we start this? Well, we started this with how did I get out to Southern Illinois?
Yeah, that tangent sort of like that's my nickname.
We're going to be here for 10 hours.
I know, man. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just funny. Like the people that I went to college with, and I see how successful they are now, like running hedge funds and stuff. And I was like, I remember when you like were so hammered, you like pissed on your own clothes. Like, how are you running somebody's hedge fund right now? Like, it's just funny because you used to see them at a different time of their life.
I read a book about that. How an individual does that transition from college student who's like puking on the couch, and like parents have seen that kid, and then that kid becomes like a private banker, and now he's like out there trying to fundraise from those same individuals. How you make that transition? Be like, I was that kid that was puking on the couch. However, now I'm a manager.
I'm much better now. I'm much better. So how did you go from college football to Navy SEAL?
Yeah. So with all this stuff happening, my senior year, I was trying to figure out what to do. And going back to G.I. Jane, I come home one night, my roommate, he's a starting safety for 4 years, went into Marine Corps, flew F-18s, Top Gun pilot. We watched G.I. Jane. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And so from that point forward. I read every book. I watched every, Discovery Channel, all the jazz. And it's wild. And you may have gone through this too. The focus that I had was unbelievable. I didn't want to do or think about anything else. Like this was it. Like I was going to graduate. I was going in the military. Funny thing is, I was so non-military-esque that I didn't even know the difference between an enlisted and an officer. Like that's how dumb I was, right? In terms of, so when I went down to the recruiting station, he goes, well, he's like, you're at the university. Are you graduating? I said, yeah. He goes, well, you can be an officer. I said, great. What's that?
That's awesome.
He said, well, we're here in Carbondale. We handle all folks who want to be enlisted. You have to go to St. Louis and deal with the officer recruiting program. So they sent me up to St. Louis. I met with the recruiter there. The way they do it is like, I guess they apply you for all officer positions, planes, trains, automobiles, ships, supply, special warfare. I got accepted into every program except Naval Special Warfare.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute. I don't want to do any of those other things. I want to be a SEAL. He said, well, you can pick one of these other spots and you could do a lateral transfer in a couple years. And again, I had no idea about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
There was not as much information as there now, as now there's a ton. So I said, no, thank you. I'm just going to go enlist. And that's it.
It's funny how like watershed moments, like small things can completely change the trajectory of your future career. It would have been a much different life had you been a Navy SEAL officer. It's just crazy.
It probably would have hated it.
Yeah.
Initially.
Yeah.
It's not why I went in, right? Yeah. And like many. I mean, I was in buds with Mike Murphy, and Mike tried to
Medal of Honor winner, right?
Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor Mike Murphy. And he tried to decommission because he was the same way. He had no idea that he was going to be putting PowerPoint briefs together.
Yeah.
I mean, he was I
did my fair share of those.
Hardcore kid from the Northeast, played hockey, getting in fights. We nicknamed him A Count because he literally did more A Count bodybuilders at Buds, screwing up everything. He just didn't want to be an officer.
Yeah.
And again, nothing against officers at all, but he, you were one.
Yeah.
You turned out all right.
That's debatable.
And he actually tried to decommission, and they blasted him for that. I think he did 1,000 A Counts for that because do you realize how hard it was to get you here? Like all the stuff, all the money, all the other individuals that you took their position. Like, we don't ever think about those things, especially when you're young in service. And so he got his ass beat for that, and the rest is history.
So going through Buds, man, it's just talking about like you were I was an officer, and I just remember. It's good and bad because it was very lonely being an officer. I remember just like looking at the enlisted guys, and there's a bond there that as an officer, you can't bond with enlisted dudes like that. You know what I mean? It's just not there naturally. But also I got to step back far enough to kind of see how cool they were and see the things they would do, So there's a lot of admiration there, but also like.
Did you get made fun of all day too? Like we used to make fun. I don't know why. I look back and I'm like.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
man,
you can't have thin skin as an officer.
Some of those guys are the brightest guys I've ever worked with, But for some reason, I got like pulled into that like conformity mindset of like all officers are stupid. Yeah. All officers don't work.
Totally.
This from the enlisted, but that and I'm sure someone will listen to this and go, well, yeah, that's true, and like, no, it's not.
It's all different.
It's all different, right? Trust me, I worked with plenty of enlisted guys, many that are.
Yeah, there's a different. Sharpest. It's a different job, right? You know what I mean?
It's a different job. 100%.
The officer's not supposed to be the tactical expert.
No,
you know what I mean. And as an officer, you can't have thin skin either. And if you're introspective enough, the officers teasing you is the way that they bond, and the officers or the enlisted guys teasing you is a way that they bond with each other, and them criticizing you is a way that they bond too. So go ahead and be the shitbag because that means that they're bonding and they trust each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And plus it was just lonely just because like you don't have the same camaraderie, but it was really cool just getting to sit back and watch how amazing they were at their jobs, and I think if you're an officer, like family listens to this and you go in and you understand it is your job to lead, but also have a admiration and respect for the guys that you're leading, then you'll do a lot better.
Judd, that goes back to the security of the pack, right?
Yeah.
Really, as an officer, you have to be very careful about being part of the pack, right? Being part of the tribe.
You have to be
the tribe needs to be part of the tribe, right? Like that bond needs to be there. We expect the officer to be that leader, right? To be that forward-facing external force, if you want to put it, right? If it's your job to go get us jobs, like you need to be out there getting us jobs and being in that role and being the best you can at that position. I don't need you to be able to swing, a sledgehammer or use a quickie.
And we've all known the officers that try to get really good tactically. And it's like, that's cool, man, but that's not your job,
I still don't understand why officers are going through, let's say, CQC.
Yeah.
Not that they don't need to be somewhat provisional, don't shoot anybody, right? So it's I don't need you being good at that.
Yeah.
I need you being a good leader. That's it. 100%.
I mean, all the enlisted guys were much more highly trained than I was as far as the tactical stuff, and as they should have been. And when I was going through the process and they were like, don't fraternize with the NCOs, at first I was like, well, that's kind of fucking snooty. What do we think we're better than they are? But then I understood the importance of it. Is like, if they see you getting drunk, or if you become really good buddies with somebody that's like a corporal, and then there's times when you have to make tough decisions, especially like in warfare, where you have to, say, hey, we have to take this building, and you have to put that corporal's life at risk for the mission or for the pack. You might be hesitant to do that, and it compromises your role as a leader.
I think there's fine balance, Jet. There's one time I'll say there's balance, because I think I would like to talk a little bit about balance or non-balance or
imbalance, maybe.
Imbalance. There you go. Non-balance. There's my state education. But I think in this regard, you can have the balance, right? You can be one of the guys from a certain perspective, but also not.
Yeah,
right?
You're just not fully in. Yeah. So I remember it being a little bit lonely as an officer, and you got to be prepared for that and willing to accept it. And at the end of the day, you're there to serve the mission first. And
I agree.
And it's hard. That's why sometimes former enlisted guys don't make great officers, because their job as a senior enlisted is, their main job is to take care of the soldiers or the sailors. You know what I mean? And sometimes you have to make really hard decisions as an officer to get the mission done or to fit a broader strategic goal. I remember when I was in the 10th Mountain, I had to sit down and talk to the platoon, because we could no longer go into these buildings hard and kick down doors, and we had to take more risks. And the guys were mad, and they're like, well, you talk to the families, and when when a guy gets killed. And I'm like, I understand that. But for every house we piss off, every civilian we kill or property damage, it leads to more violence. And then I'm concerned with the platoon that's replacing us and what they're going to have to deal with based on what we did tonight. And it's a hard thing to, No,
those decisions are not easy.
They're not.
By any means. And I do think, like everything else, I think I got taught a good lesson once by a friend it was older. He was an officer, and he said, his main thing was why he was good was he always was able to manage kind of 2 steps down the ladder and always 2 steps up, and always, and he can play that, right? And I think that's important there, because if you can, as if you want to call it an enlisted guy or one of the boys, understand why those decisions are being made, not because, we should just be able to go out and do what we are here to do.
Yeah.
But think a few rungs up the ladder. I think it really, I just think it really helps overall morale.
Yeah.
And the unity of the group. But as you get older, as you know, and you become, you get into those leadership positions, you see why those decisions, are made or were made.
And you brought it up, like they teach you, like, you got to know the mission 2 levels up. And that's a common, and it's a very good advice. Like, so the squad leaders, they could understand the company commander's job were always the best ones, man, because they could understand the strategic, goal, the commander's intent, and they were just always on it and 1 step ahead. You know what I mean? And then the platoon leaders and company commanders that could put themselves in the corporal's shoes, You know what I mean? And kind of understand the stuff that they were dealing with. Those were always the best, you know? So, sorry, we're getting distracted. I have a hard time staying on point. So what was Buds like? So when I picture Buds, it's just working out.
Yeah.
It's like the most grueling, physically intensive thing.
It is.
What else is Buds about?
I mean, I think the easy, you know, if you want to say, you know, physical mental toughness, right? It is, but it is working out. I mean, you're working out for, I mean, that's what like drew me in. I was like, oh, I get to work out for 6 months, like, and I get paid for this and do cool shit. Yeah, sign me up. That's what you do. And the ones who last are just the ones that can keep going and endure, you know, physical and mental pain. You have to be comfortable being completely uncomfortable and in pain all the time. And that's what I think prepares you for the rest of your life, because what's normal for you is really uncomfortable or really painful or kind of psychotic to other people. And that's what I think you learn at Buds. You're constantly wet, cold, wet, sandy, miserable, but you just got to deal with that.
Day in, day out.
Day in, day out. I don't care if you're an Olympic athlete or not. As soon as you get wet and sandy and you're told to run 4 miles with boots and pants on and there's sand, you know, crawling up your ass, like it's a different story.
Yeah.
And you just have to do it. Doesn't matter. If they tell you to run 10 miles, you have to do it. You swim 5 miles, you have to do it. That's it.
I just always say, like, if you would lay out the day of a dude in Buds to somebody that wasn't familiar with that, they would like, this is humanly impossible.
It is. Well, I mean, I you know, watching some of your stuff, there's a difference of like being like in shape, being fit, to being like operationally ready, right? Because now you're, you know, you may not be able to run a marathon or, you know, win at a certain thing, but you can go ahead and put a bunch of weight on, be completely miserable, your knees hurt, your back hurt, be without, you know, a ton of water, you know, somewhat dehydrated and still complete the mission. Yeah. Those are, you know, you're kind of mission combat ready versus being quote unquote, you know, in shape and lean and
spot on, man,
fit and all that.
And then the intangible part is being that uncomfortable and tired and acknowledging it, but not being so focused on it that you can still focus on the mission.
Yeah.
You know, not being so focused on your own misery that you can like step out of your discomfort and like still focusing on getting the job done.
Yeah. Like last night I had, according to my Whoop, I got 3.5 hours sleep. I don't know why. And 1%, I got no sleep last night and I woke up and I'm like, oh man, I got to do this podcast. I'm tired. You know, I'm not even thinking about it. Right.
Yeah.
Drank some coffee and we're good to go.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's something different. It's an intangible part that you see the guys that make it and don't. You know?
Yeah. But so you're right. Going back, it is. You're working out constantly. The hardest part is getting up every day. So it's usually not like an individual evolution. It's waking up in the morning, literally being this, as you know, more sore than you've ever been in your life, head to toe, immediately going into the cold Pacific Ocean at whatever, 50 something degrees, or the weather being like in the 40s, you know, or doing a 4 mile time run or doing whatever. And that's when most people quit. They don't quit people do quit during the evolutions. Most of them quit in the morning when no one is around, or it's just...
You have time to think.
Yeah, you have time to think. You get out of bed and saying, this is not what I want to do.
Yep. I always notice that too. People quit when you're not doing something. When they have
best thing to do about it is just don't think.
Don't think. I always tell it to you, just don't think.
Mind off. I was always better when I didn't think. I think that's why I had a pretty decent career in the military. I just didn't really have to think that much. I just did. As soon as I stepped out, I started thinking. That's when everything went to shit.
No shit. That's the advice I always give to the kids, because they'll come in and like they're getting ready to go to 2-a-days and they start listing to me all the shit they're going to have to do. And it brought me back to Ranger School. The guys would list everything. I'm like, hey, you're not doing that now. Go get a drink of water and put your shoes on. Just don't think about it. And when they say do it, you know, and that's the advice I give to everybody, because I saw a guy quit in Ranger School. You know, you don't quit right away, but you just don't try. Mm-hmm. And it was like when we were comfortable and he just was thinking about everything we had to do. And I'm just like, oh my God, man, you're just thinking too much, dude. Like, yeah. So walk me through Buds, man. Because a lot of people, you have a story that's incredible. We need to get to it. But a lot of people are interested in Buds. Like, what's it really like? Because they see the walk carries and the swims and the runs.
Yeah.
What's a day, and for each phase of Buds, what's a typical day like?
So broken up into phases and they change all the time. But let's just say there's like there's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So let's say phase 1 is, you know, fitness, physical fitness, just like beat the shit out of you, kind of boot camp. Phase 2, diving. Phase 3, land warfare. It's kind of how it was broken up when I went through. It always changes, but let's just make believe that's the way it is right now. And before that, there's like a basic course. It's more like get yourself ready for the phases. And you start with about 100 and let's say 75. That's what we started with. And we ended up with, I think, 27 or 23 original. We had a lot of rollbacks, and we had individuals that rolled into our class. We had a bunch roll out of our class after Hell Week and after first phase, but roughly 175 start, 20 something finish. And no shit, 0 dark 30. That's what's on the actual sheet. You're there at, I think it was like 4 a.m. first day. You get the snot pounded out of you on concrete, push-ups, sit-ups, all that type of stuff. You're hitting the surf. You just do that for like all morning. It's miserable. Then you used to run a mile to the chow hall each way as a class. So you worked out. You got your brain speed in. Then you ran a mile. You ate as fast as you could. And you ran a mile back. And then you did that again. And you do that for pretty much all of first phase.
Yeah.
Boats, logs. I was scared, you're talking about just do.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, well, what happens when I can't do any more like push-ups or sit-ups? I was actually thinking, and I had no idea, because there is a point where you can't do any more. Right? And you just, you stick you stick your ass in the air. And the instructor turns around, you put your knees on the deck, and then like you turn around, you jump back up and whatever. So you figure out how to just get through it. And then, Hell Week is miserable. You sleep maybe 4 to 5 hours the whole week. If you win certain events and races, I was part of the tall boat crew. They called it the Jolly Greens, the midget and the Jolly Greens, everybody awesome. In between. And, we had a big Jolly Green painted on the front, and we won every race when we touched the water. I don't know why. We just did everything. We crushed it, and we got smoked when we were on the land. And so when you won a race, you got to like take a nap while everybody else was getting punished.
Is that during Hell Week?
That's during Hell Week. Yeah. It's actually during everything at Bud's.
Yeah.
But during Hell Week.
So they wire in motivation to compete
all the time. You are competing 100%. Yeah. Everything is a competition.
Other than quitting, because you have to actually meet certain qualifications to keep going, right?
You have to meet the minimum standards. So for instance, every week there's a 4-mile timed run. Every week there's a 2-mile timed ocean swim. Then there's a obstacle course. At least that's how I remember it. I don't know what's changed, but those are like the timed evolutions that you had to pass.
Okay.
And each phase it got faster. So the time runs were in, t-shirt, boots, pants.
How long were the runs normally?
4 miles on the sand. I think first phase was 32 minutes, then 30, then 28, something like that.
That's moving.
So by the end, you're moving, right? Yeah. Everybody, right?
Yeah.
And I was kind of in the back of the pack on the timed runs, but I was always in the front when we did our conditioning runs, because if you fell back on the conditioning runs, like they had a cutoff, the front would just jog in a little circle while the back got their ass beat for however long.
Yeah.
So for some reason, it was called the Goon Squad. I never got gooned. However, on the timed runs, all those people that were, I guess, gooning, ran faster.
That's funny. Different things that motivate people.
Yeah, exactly. So you always did timed evolutions. Same thing with 2-mile swim. You had to pass. And the same thing with the O course. You had to improve. And those were like the timed. And then they threw in different evolutions here and there, depending on the skill sets. Like dive phase, you had all these different skills that you had to pass. Just like
was the water what got most people, or
the water got most people in terms of the cold.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Cold is it's another chapter. It's a whole nother story, because nobody likes being cold. You don't know how long you're going to be there. It's demoralizing, and
the range will ruin my cold tolerance, man. I hate being cold now.
It's terrible.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, that the people don't understand. They can go get in a very cold ocean or they can sit in a cold tub, which I hate to this day. And that sucks. But what happens is when you're hungry and you've been out there already, and then you just can't warm up and your core temperature starts to get lower and lower, it's a different kind of cold. You can go from a comfortable hotel room, run in the ocean, be cold, and then run back and oh, I'm tough. Okay, you're
same thing with the cold tub. I go from a warm house to my cold tub,
but it's when it's hour after hour.
And then go back.
Yeah, it's a different kind of cold, man.
Yeah, it's miserable, and that's what gets many of the folks.
And then later on, there's shooting requirements and standards.
Yeah, so then the first 8 to 10 weeks physical fitness. Second, but you're also doing a lot of skills, right? So there's always skills, and
even in the first phase,
patrolling, over the beach stuff. You're small unit tactics constantly. So
Okay.
you're doing all types of, taking.
So how long is a training day normally in buds?
I mean,
It's all day.
It's all day. It could be from 4 a.m. to midnight, and you might get a couple hours sleep, and you're up, right? And then some days, of course, you get more time off.
Sure.
But you're grinding pretty hard constantly. And then dive phase is dive. Like you're diving, constant combat dives, underwater, planting, limpet mines and all types of stuff. And again, this is like 20 years ago, so I don't know what they're doing nowadays and what kind of heads up displays they have. But you do dive phase, and then you do land warfare. And land warfare is typical land warfare. Like, so you do a lot of shooting, a lot of blowing things up, a lot of rockets, all that type of stuff. That rappelling, and that for me, third phase was most fun. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
And then so about somewhere 10 to 30% make it through buds on average.
Yeah, on average, I believe I don't know if the attrition rate for officers are higher or harder. I think it's just more difficult because there's only a certain amount of slots for officers, and so it's really difficult just to even get a slot.
Gotcha.
And then to make it through. But I think the attrition still stays at like 25 to 30%. And then the
pipeline, once you get out of buds.
Once you get out of buds, you go to an East Coast team or a West Coast team, or do you go to a SEAL delivery vehicle team out of Hawaii, which none of this stuff is sensitive in nature. All this stuff is public knowledge. And you meet your platoon of 18, and now you got a whole bunch of new guys that you have to, you're the new guy, and now you have to prove yourself all over again.
And where was your first deployment?
Germany. Yeah. And we did a ton of exercises all over Europe and northern Germany. And, it was just kind of like my first taste of what it's like to be with a a bunch of guys. And I was the only new guy in my first platoon, which was very odd. Our sister platoon had, I think, like 6 or 7.
So you got a lot of attention.
Yeah, I got all the attention. I don't know why. Thank God I was somewhat of a good performer, that I didn't get my tail beat every day. But
I want to talk about Red Wings. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, it's good.
So people that don't,
this year's the 20th anniversary, and
it's crazy how fast that goes by.
It is crazy. So there's going to be some, there'll be some events that Amber and I will go to and be part of. Yeah.
So, people that aren't familiar, is tied into the Marcus Trail Lone Survivor, and you guys, your sister platoon, is that correct?
Yeah.
So tell me about the coin.
And of course, Marcus is a friend, and him and Mel are doing great stuff now. So,
can you tell me about the coin toss real quick?
Yeah. So that our task unit was just, the whole story was about, but really it was our sister platoon. Before we went on deployment, one platoon was going to Germany to prepare, do joint exercises around, Europe, NATO stuff. And the other was going to Afghanistan right away. And they didn't know who to send. So literally we flipped the coin, and my platoon lost the coin toss. The other platoon.
And losing meant that you did not get to go to war.
Exactly. Yeah. Losing meant we didn't go to war, right? I had a same mentor who pulled me aside when I body slammed the Harris kid on the beach. He said something once. Mike Mayer, his name's Mike Mayer, and he was a stud. He said going to war is a privilege, and I really believe that, because I would say 99% of the guys I worked with most came in to go to war. Some didn't. Some didn't like it. But so when we lost, we were absolutely pissed. We were frustrated. Like this is not, this is bullshit.
And that statement might rub some people the wrong way. I just think they don't understand the context. Like, you have been through some of the most grueling training. This is what you do. This is what it's like, practicing and not getting to go to the game. I know you don't
go into special operations to hand out candy at a it would be practicing every day in football for your whole life and not playing a game.
Yeah.
And that just,
which I really feel bad for the dudes that went through all that training bure the GWAT and never got
100%
to know what
all the 90s era veterans that that are not bad guys. These are all same guys like us. Yeah. Exactly. Same cut from the same sheet. Just didn't have the opportunity. And it's frustrating. A lot of those guys don't take that well either. And so you sign up for a mission to go after bad guys. And when you don't get to do that, especially when you're competitive, like this is like competing. I want to prove what I've trained to do and see if I'm really good at what I think I'm good at. And so we went to Germany. The other platoon went to Afghanistan. The rest is history. And
so what happened was Marcus's it was a squad, I think, right? It wasn't very many dudes, like 6 or something.
He was in a small sniper element of 4. Mike Murphy was a ground force commander on that.
Which it was early in the war, so everyone's fairly inexperienced.
There was like I believe it may have been their first op. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was.
And they basically got overrun, and then you guys were the QRF.
They were seen and they got overrun, and then we could talk. This is a whole nother thing. You could talk about for hours, and I don't want to be up here forever. But it's easy to Monday morning quarterback everything. Everything just went wrong. Go wrong, right? No communication. Decision making was questionable. All that type of stuff, and the platoon launches to as a quick reaction force. So
it's during daylight. It's very risky.
Extremely risky during daylight when they know that there were shoulder fired, RPGs and other things, potentially manpads and stuff that there was intel about. And the first helicopter, as they're coming in to the HLZ, got hit, and everyone on the other helos, like they watched that craft.
So people that don't know, like you almost always flying in tandem, two Chinooks.
Two Chinooks, yeah.
And so they had to see their half their platoon go down.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, terrible, right? And obviously they went searching for those guys all night. Everybody did. So it was like, the rest of the guys that were still alive, the platoon, a ton of Rangers, bunch of tier 1 assets. Like it was just a whole mission.
My brother was attached to Red Squadron, I believe, on the QRF for that. Yep. So yeah, he said it was pretty bad.
Yeah. And it was a bad area to begin with, right? There was probably shouldn't have been in that. Again, not trying to judge anything at all, but just all the stuff that came out, they probably shouldn't have been there. But I think if you asked anyone to go do that op again, maybe you mitigate some risk, but I think every operator would raise their hand and want to go operate, right? Like that's the idea.
Yeah.
Let's go operate. So be careful what you wish for. A lot of people were saying that after.
I mean, put things in perspective. Like we all know the Black Hawk Down story, and it's famous in American history. And I think 18 dudes were killed, something like that. I think 19. We lost 19 special operators between the 160th guys that were on the helicopter and the SEALs at one moment. So that's an extraordinary amount of very highly trained men from very small, close-knit community to lose at one time in one day.
It's a ton. You don't prepare for it at all. And it was a shock. Black Hawk Down, that was probably the first massive loss of life in a long time. Correct? Right. So I imagine there was a lot of stuff afterwards that people weren't prepared for. Obviously, it was a horrible situation.
And this is early in the war, so we're not used to.
We're not used to losing. Yeah. We're not used to losing teammates, and especially not losing a ton. And I remember that we immediately deployed because they didn't have a platoon to operate, and it was busy. It started really heating up at that time, Taliban. And I remember that platoon came back to Germany, and they were supposed to go visit with the psychs, with the shrinks, and they were only supposed to have 30-minute slots for each person. The first person was in there for like 2.5 or 3 hours. Yeah, and it was just bad. Like they were all.
How do you meet with a psychiatrist for 30 minutes?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is just nobody was prepared for that. Just that type of loss, that situation, and we're really good at burying things really quickly, and again. We were deployed the whole time. We didn't think about it. We didn't really get to talk to anybody. It was weird. It always is.
So how do you repopulate a platoon when it's devastated like that? Like half the platoon dies.
They came back. I believe they spent some time in Germany, and then when that deployment was over for SEAL Team 10, they just reorganized the platoons, and guys that were still in just hopped in another platoon, and they just kind of built up platoons back to their 18 strong.
So I'd love to stay on that just to talk about the trauma associated with that. But what was the rest of your deployment like? What were the nature of your missions during that deployment?
First, I mean, if you want to talk about trauma, and again, people don't know this, but I'm going to say it. Like, there were people in my platoon that were like done, not good, 100% like ruined, could not function or operate. I don't think people know that, and I would never mention who, but like these were like, it was in the movie Black Hawk Down, he says combat ineffective. They were actually combat ineffective, and they weren't even there. So guys were that distraught from losing our buddies.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to a few of them, like, hey, literally sitting down, almost like it was like almost like a coach, or like, hey, I need you like right now.
Yeah.
I remember having that conversation.
Man.
Like, I need, we're about to go into like bad guy country immediately. I need you because like you're our guy. And like literally having those conversations. And we were not even like, we were going to, we were just getting over there. And so here we are, we're trying to deal with our friends that we just lost. And we're just starting our combat deployment, which is just heating up. And literally the second we got on the ground, I think we were out the night after or 2 nights after on a full like direct action raid that, I did a lot years later.
Yeah.
But I didn't expect that.
So days,
right away.
Is it, you said days
like
later?
1 or 2 days, like in country, we were like Black Hawk to the X, fast rope, breach.
That went on a lot more early in the road too. Like on the
like,
X.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. This is wild. And that's how the whole deployment was, like constant. And, but going back to the trauma thing, like it was already there.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And it's the first time I thought we were invincible. I went, oh man, like I literally said, people, like in my mind, people can die doing this. Like all I was doing was like, chest beating and like watching movies and reading books and like everyone's a hero. And like, oh, wait a minute. Think of the other side of this mission. Which is like, this is real. Yeah. Like there's real bullets, there's real rockets, and people are trying to kill you also.
Yeah. I just remember the first time getting shot at, it's like the violence of it and the I could, taste metal in the back of my mouth, like a sense of visceral fear, and you just acknowledge it at the time. You're like, oh, this is different.
It's different. It's real. It's not sim. No, it's not blanks.
It's different. And it's funny because like there's probably an element of fear from the guys that were combat infected, but a lot of it's just like grief. Like it's overwhelming grief. And then the funny part is not funny, but ironic part to get him back into the fight. It's not to call him a coward it's to say, hey, the rest of your family needs you. Oh, 100%. So it's like love on both sides.
No, coward was never even a thought. That was this was like I just wanted my brother to be good. Like I cared about them being just being okay.
Yeah.
It had nothing. Yeah. It was never even a thought. The cowardice wasn't ever.
No. And the thing that gets them back in the fight is the love for their friends and like the need to be there with them.
We have to do this. Like these things are going to happen, and we're just going to march on. Like we have a lot of work to do, and that's the way I was kind of, talking with the guys. Like, hey, we it's our time now. Like we're we're in the game, and we have to be locked on because we want to come back home to our wives and our kids. Yeah. And the only way we do that is if we work together, and we kind of bounce back from this, gnarly, nasty, horrible thing that we just dealt with.
Like seeing how the guys would grieve for each other over there too was something that stuck with me. And just seeing the platoons that like it's the first guy that they lost, how they handled that. But in his mind, for some reason, 3rd platoon or my platoon and 3rd battalion, and just throughout, even because that was the platoon that was in Black Hawk Down, just the history of losing a lot of guys for some reason. And just how they handled it, they almost learned to like compartmentalize grief to get it's not like it's a healthier way, but they had to figure out a strategy mentally and emotionally to like put that away for right now and continue on. And they just got better and better at doing that.
And I think that's fine. And people could argue, I mean, I'm sure a mental health therapist or mental health expert would
What's
argue,
the alternative?
like, that's not the way to do it. I would argue that. And I'm in mental health care. I'm like, hey, hold up. We have a mission. We have to, you need to compartmentalize. You need to, these things happen and they are going to happen. And if you want to stay in this for 10, 20, 30 years, they're going to happen more.
Yeah.
And one day you will have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right. You will have to kind of deal with that genie. But right now,
part of the problem though is the nature of the GWOT. Like people get in during combat and they retire for the full 20, never knowing a peacetime army.
Yeah.
That's insane to me. That's never happened in the history of our country.
No, I mean, I have friends. I did six tours. I literally have friends that have done, as you 15, 20 plus combat tours.
And it's not just the trauma of seeing your friends get killed and the explosions that you deal with. It's leaving your family, the strain on your marriage, the becoming distant from normal society because you can't relate to them anymore. And we look at the total number of casualties in this GWOT, and it's not astounding compared to other conflicts. But what we fail to realize, it's a very small number of men, mostly men, going out over and over again.
You can say that. It's okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's it's extraordinarily small number of dudes that are doing all the fighting. And it's for year after year, deployment after deployment. And so it's the trauma layered on trauma that's unique in the history of our country.
It is. And I don't think you ever look at it that way. And I never really did. I mean, I see it now. I'm in awe of my buddies that are still going, and especially the ones that, and granted, I don't know how they're doing, but I think that the ones are doing okay. I'm like, wow, they're a lot tougher than I was or am, that they're able to just keep going and able to compartmentalize, but maybe one day they will have to kind of lick the wounds or take care of themselves, or maybe not. I don't know. Everyone's different. And that's the other thing too. Like, we're all different.
Yeah.
So one person, it's like, just head trauma in the ring, the boxing ring. Let's take in the ring. Somebody get punched one time and be ruined for life. Others could be lifelong fighters. And I don't want to say they're okay, but they're not maybe.
Stay functional.
They stay functional, right? And what's the difference? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to identify.
Yeah.
I want to move on to what you did on the team. But first, real quick, well, not necessarily real quick, what are some things that personality characteristics and traits that you believe someone would need to be in that community? What are some things you would look for when making selections? Yeah.
I mean, I think a team is like number one, right? It's team. When individuals are, it's easy to see. We don't like individuals. But this is where the difficult part is, where we want people to be creative, think for themselves. However, you also got to be a conformist and be part of the team and work as a unit. And so, you always say, I'd rather have a team player that's average than like a Olympic athlete that just thinks for themselves and forgets about like the unit, because it's the unit that makes everything happen. It's the individuals that are, on the right and the left all the time. And those individuals would do anything for you, not just on the battlefield, but everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I think being a team player is one of, if not the most important aspects of being an operator. And then, the other traits that you have to have, we talked about going through Bud's physical and mental toughness, like that, you have to be, you cannot not be physically and mentally tough, right? You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with being in pain. And we take that also through the rest of our life. What we think is normal, most people will crack.
Yeah.
So we got, being a team player, physically, mentally tough, being uncomfortable all the time. Tenacity, grit. I love individuals who are smart, right? And again, I'm not talking about the book smart, where you're an MIT or Harvard or Stanford, PhD or whatever. I'm talking about individuals who just are really good at something, and they can figure it out, and they can solve the problem for that. And you could tear apart a Humvee and put it back together or whatever it is. And like, you're really, that to me, that's smart, right? That's intelligent.
I also notice that operators tend to have a lot of social intelligence and emotional intelligence, and they can read people They can understand the environment they're in socially and conform to that if need be.
That's, I'm not a self-promoter, but I'm very good at reading people and reading a room. I know the audience really well. I could talk to an individual for 30 seconds and know if that individual had some issues going on before. I could talk to a woman and know if they've gone through some, problems in their life or what they do. Like, again, everyone's got their own gifts. That's one of mine, but I think that's just kind of goes across the board with many good operators, right? Is that they know their audience, or they know how to size up a situation in a very short amount of time. And when I went through my selection, the individual who was running training at that time made us read one of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. Mm. And that's exactly what it was about. It was called thin slicing. And thin slicing was basically taking a situation and breaking it down in like minimal amounts of about as fast as you can. So it was almost like battlefield intelligence. Like totally. You assault a target, you take a few people, you're trying to figure out, are we at the right place? Are we at the wrong place? Are there bad guys somewhere else? You have to do that in a really short amount of time. That kind of goes along.
We kind of had a guy that was kind of designated to be the interrogator through the interpreter. And those guys, some of them were really good at knowing who in the room to focus on without knowing what anybody looked like, prior to the objective. They're like, we need to talk to that guy more. Just based on subtle cues like mannerisms, who they're sitting with, the way other people in the room are looking at them for cues. Yeah. And the guys who are really good would pick up on all that stuff. It really is a unique trait and a special trait to have. I love Malcolm Gladwell's books, by the way.
He's great. I mean, they basically said from the research, a person who's getting interviewed for a job, they really only need to interview that person for about 2 minutes. If that person is going to be a good hire or a bad hire. And at the end of the day, I don't fully care if that individual is so technical in what they do. I want to know if I get along with this individual. They're going to fit in the culture. Can I trust that person? Yeah. So you're going back on the traits. Trust is, ethics, trust. When I turn my back, do I know that you're going to do the right thing? We have to have that as an operator. I have to trust you. If I can't trust
integrity
you,
is like,
it's everything. Yeah. And I'm not going to be able to work with you if I can't trust what's coming out of your mouth or what you're doing. And, I've seen a lot of that.
We're looking at the things that make good operators. Those are also things that bond human beings. Right? So the bonds that these guys that have these traits, that integrity, trust, social intelligence, selflessness, when something like Red Wings happens, it's just the level of emotional devastation is just amplified. Because these are guys that you trust, that you've been through the toughest things already in training with.
I take these traits forever. I cannot work with someone I don't trust or have integrity. My business, every single person on the team, I trust. I don't have to micromanage. I know they're going to do the right thing. I know if they make a mistake, they're going to own up to it. Like, I have to work with individuals like that. Yeah. It's something in me that's
another thing I noticed, just working with these guys, is that they don't do anything in training. Well, let me rephrase. A lot of what they do in training isn't like super ninja stuff. It's the basics done well through repetition. And the reason they could do that is because they don't have to be micromanaged. Because as an officer, I was in 10th Mountain, and great guys, love the 10th Mountain guys. But there was so much micromanaging that didn't have to do with actual training that had to go on just to get these guys through life, that the amount of time and energy we got to dedicate to training was greatly reduced. And I just noticed in these other units, the amount of reps they got in, because these guys, they were self-sufficient. They would show up on time with what they needed to have. They would focus on being productive. And, if their personal lives were a shit show, they could compartmentalize that. And they just more reps. More money helps, but more reps.
Repetitions is everything. That's why as we get later in life, we try to play golf, and we're okay, but we're okay because we play once a week, right? Yeah. Or if you can get there twice a week. Except when you're growing up and you play every day, repetition. Yeah. I think that's another Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes, the 10,000 hour, was that him?
Yeah, 10,000 hour to become an expert in something. It's real. It doesn't matter what age you're at. Yeah. So the repetitions are everything. And yes, I think some of the tier 1 units get repetitions in what they need to.
Yeah, and the informality of the training. They'd be out in small groups and they could go through things so much faster. I watched my brother Hayhill one time, and they got 12 jumps in like a day because everybody was just on it. where that would never happen in the larger conventional army.
Yeah. Well, it's also nice when you have other people packing for you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. They had a lot of support.
Yeah. I've been there, so I know. This is great. You got to trust those people, but still, yes, you can do it.
So can we talk about, is there any other traits that stand out to you right now?
I mean, I think we covered some, and there's a lot of traits, right? And I think we covered some of the main ones that, humility is a big one. I've been told by individuals on the outside that they never realized how humble, not so wound up and crazy that they expected. Some of the
I noticed too, their peaks and valleys are mitigated. They don't get too high or too low. You know what I mean? They don't get really up. They don't get really down. At least not in the course of their job.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because a lot of them are borderline narcissistic and extremely confident, but also humble at the same time. And I know that sounds contradictory, but there's not a lot of bragging or thumping their chest, which is like false bravado.
Yeah.
They're just extraordinarily confident in their abilities. Yeah.
I always felt that the second you acted a bit too confident, confidence not bad, cocky, like you immediately, something went wrong, right? You fell, you did something stupid, you forgot something, and the team would immediately just
and that social intelligence, they like antennas,
focus on you. And so I would laugh at the guys who are like that. I'm like, this something's going to happen. And immediately, it would. So I liked to stay in that zone that you're talking about, because I was always afraid that if you got too cocky, Murphy's Law would just kind of remind you that you're human.
I always feel like God does a pretty good job. I'm a Christian, of putting me in check. Every time I feel like I'm on top of the world, he'll make sure that something happens that like humbles me again or embarrasses me.
All the time.
It's pretty good. He's pretty good at doing that.
You can never be too comfortable.
We're going to break here. I hope you enjoyed the conversation so far. Come back next week for part 2, where Marcus shares more of his experiences as a Navy SEAL, his transition to civilian life, his journey navigating family struggles and depression, and how he discovered a life-changing treatment that is helping veterans regain their light and find purpose. See you next week.